I'm reading from the book of Matthew, the 22nd chapter, beginning with the 15th verse. Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teachers, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, you hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax. They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, whose portrait is this and whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Then he said to them, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. When they heard this, they were amazed. So they left him and went away. Now, the first thing to remember in this scripture is that the people asking the question weren't really looking for an answer to the question. They were trying to get Jesus in trouble. And they kind of figured, well, we're going to ask Jesus if it's okay to pay, if we should pay taxes. And if he says no, we'll report him to the Romans. And say, hey, Jesus is telling people not to pay taxes. You need to arrest him. And if he says yes, we'll tell all of the Jews that he's a collaborator who thinks we should pay taxes to our Roman occupiers. So they thought, we got him. There's no way he can answer this question and not get in trouble. It's like the old Groucho Marx question, do you still beat your wife? You know, you can't straight up answer that question with a yes or a no. You get in trouble either way. That's what they planned for Jesus. And Jesus calls them out on it. Because I know what you're trying to do here. And then he asks them to bring him the coin. Now, all Roman coins at the time had the picture of Caesar on them. This was so that Roman soldiers would know who was paying them, would be loyal to the person on the coin they got. And when they bring him the coin, he says, who is this? And they go, Caesar. Well, give Caesar what is Caesar's. Give God what is God's. Now, even though Jesus was mainly concerned with answering the question without falling into the trap that the Pharisees set for him, that still applies to us today. Now, we don't have an emperor. We have a government. So the question is, as Christians, what do we give to the government and what do we give to God? And it's funny because I've noticed that for a lot of Christians, the answer to this question changes depending on which party is in power. And I think we need, as Christians, an answer that doesn't depend upon whether or not we agree with the government. But what is our responsibility as Christians to our government, whether we agree with them or not? what is our responsibility to God? How do we divide the two? Well, the first thing we owe the government goes right back to the very question that the Pharisees asked Jesus. Is it right to pay taxes? And Jesus' answer is yes. Sorry about that, folks. That's the answer Jesus gives. Now, why do we pay taxes? Well, it's real simple. The government does things for us we cannot do for ourselves. We have a military to protect us. That's paid for by our taxes. We have highways that we drive on. None of you built the road to get to church this morning. None of you built the road you drive to work. Government provides transportation. I don't get to go to the meat packing plant and inspect to make sure that the meat is safe to eat. That's something the government does. That's something that's paid for by taxes. And I mean, we got it better than the people in Jesus' time had it, because the Roman government didn't really do much for them. They had no say in the government, and Jesus still told them to pay their taxes. Now, yeah, does the government pay taxes on things that I don't like? Yes. But as a general rule, the purpose of the government is to provide things that normal citizens cannot provide for themselves individually. And that's what our taxes go towards. And we owe that to our government. In a democracy, we also owe our participation in our government. Democracy doesn't work if people don't participate. And that is probably the biggest thing wrong with our democracy right now, is that almost half of Americans don't even bother to register to vote. And of those that have taken the time to register to vote, almost half of them don't bother voting in presidential elections, and way more than half of them don't bother voting in smaller elections. Show up at the polls on election day this year, when there's just county and maybe city offices, they'll be empty. I doubt if you'll have to wait in line more than 5 minutes. We owe it to our democracy to participate. And we also owe it to our democracy to be informed when we participate. A few elections ago, there was a man on a ballot for a minor position in Boone County. Who won his primary, moved on in his primary, in spite of the fact that he was sitting in jail, charged with murdering his mother. Now that is due to one thing. I guarantee you that most people that voted for him didn't know he was sitting in jail accused of murdering his mother. We owe it to the government to be informed as voters. That's what we owe our government. What do we not owe our government? We don't owe them unquestioned obedience. We don't owe them blind loyalty. That is the path of fascism. To say that whatever my government says is right, whatever my government tells me, I will do. And again, I'm not talking a particular party or not. I don't care who's in office. Because there are things that policies and laws that our government enacts, and they happen throughout history, that as Christians we should be opposed to. There are things that our government allows that as Christians we cannot do. We're given freedom and license as American citizens to do many things that as Christians we need to say, I won't do that. A few years ago there was a politician who was caught lying in an interview on one of the major networks. Now he was roundly criticized for this. And so in his next interview, somebody said, the reporter asked him, you lied to the American people. And his response was, you know, it's not a crime to lie to the media or to the American people. It's only a crime to lie to the police or when you're under oath. Now, he was right. It wasn't a crime. It didn't help him with his voters come the next election, though. He's allowed to do that as an American. As Christians, we're not. As an American, he's allowed to hate his neighbor. As Christians, we're not. As an American, he is allowed to ignore the cries of the starving children. As Christians, we are not. We cannot ignore Christ's commands to care for the least of these, for in doing so we care for him. We should, most of the time, obey the laws of this country. Most of the time, the laws are written for good reason. Most of the time, the laws are intended to protect us as individuals and as a society. But when faced with the choice, we must be willing to put the laws of God ahead of the laws of man. We must be willing to stand up when we see injustice coming from our government, when we see injustice coming from the police. We must be willing and brave enough to say that is wrong when we know it is wrong. Sometimes the gospel asks things of us we'd rather not do. Sometimes the gospel asks us to choose do what you know is right. Our closing hymn is number 653, Whiter Than Snow.